Got this cool old light. I haven't used it much. What is it? It is a Baton 3. Fairly good size rascal. Typical that, you turn the thing on, but if you hold it, high, medium, low. I usually run it on medium. Today, however, this thing got hot. I'm not sure why. I didn't think it was supposed to, but it worked good, but it got hot. See what happens. I don't use it that much because it's larger. It doesn't carry in a pocket as well as the little baton. And this one is, it's a Baton 3 as well. But this one has something different. Baton 3 Pro. Oh, that's what this one is. This is a Baton 3 Pro. Same basic idea. This one's smaller in diameter. This is much larger. Anyway, what I want to talk about tonight is maintenance guys out in the field. Or no maintenance in the field, but how can I say, construction crews. What's one of the problems, and we just ran into one today. We're looking at working on a tamp that had a bad injection pump. A little Hatch motor, single cylinder, what do they call it? Something 81S. I'd have to look it up over here. But some of you would be very familiar with it anyway, whether I told you what it was or not. Yeah, I know, glasses on, glasses off. Let's see, there it is. Engine, 1D81Z, not S. Slight differences. Now, the funny part is with this little sucker, is the engine was locked up when I got it. It's on a rebranded Dynapack plate tamp. And the starter kept kicking in and out. This seems weird. Charger was pretty good. I tested the battery. Battery tested good. What's going on here? Before it said charge. Didn't say anything was wrong with the battery. So I put it on charge and came in here for lunch and went out about an hour later. Tested it and tested okay. It's not full snuff, but it was up there pretty good. Then went to crank it over. Appendix doesn't want to move nothing. It's like, this is weird. Making noise and rattling. So I went and turned, the flywheel's locked. Notified the customer. Told him I'm going to pull the starter just to be sure. Pull the starter out and the Bendix is jammed to one side. So the starter's wasted, not just shot. I look at the ring gear and it's hurt. Well, now the engine's turning over and you can hear things scattering around inside. Well, the alternator on this thing has permanent magnets on the flywheel, and the magnets are known to fall out and hit the alternator coil and smash that. You can run them without the alternator, you just can't start them very well unless somebody plugs it in and charges it. So I told them what they could do is, on some job sites, just plug the bugger in to the truck. Get a truck near it, plug it in, get it fired up, and go do their thing. They looked at me like I had a third eye. That was at J.P. Riley, where they didn't want to put good batteries in them. You got to use them somewhere, they just wreck them. So what's the deal on this one? Well, this one has a couple of things that concern me. One of them is the weight box is noisy, as if no one's ever changed the oil, let alone checked it. And you say, that sounds weird, the other way around. No, it's nobody checks it, so it's change the oil. The other one was the belts were tight, but they didn't tighten up. The adjuster was snug tight, but the actual clamping bolt for the idler was not tight. Weird things going on here. Well, it came back and all I got was it won't start, won't run, and then when it does run, it doesn't tamp hard enough. Well, starting to come in with some ideas here. What am I talking about for maintenance when they're on the job site? Number one is somebody ought to be keeping a rough idea, either back at the office or mainly on the job site, how many hours that thing is running. There should be on the machine someplace, actually indelibly marked, should be a record of how many hours it should run, and they should estimate it. And if they don't estimate by that, they should estimate by time, etc., etc. the oil in this was in poor condition, so I figured it was probably seized internally, but it wasn't. Gas motors are pretty tough. But where the ring gear chewed, the battery was low, all connections and everything were fine, but they apparently had trouble starting it and didn't bother to change it out. Well, they have another one that they can't fix yet because they need to get parts for. This one they were hoping to get going and just figured to pick it up and bring it to me. So what did I notice about poor maintenance? Well, let's go through the list, because I just told some of it all the way through it. One of them is the fuel filter. I don't think has ever been changed on this thing. The air filter was covered completely in dust, which is semi-normal for these things, but these things do have a because it's single cylinder, they do have an air flutter on them, and it tends to clean it out to some extent. And there's a pre-spinner, spins the dirt out so it falls down. And it didn't appear to be that it was plugged, but there's no way to know. I just figured the air filter's bad. You know the fuel filter hasn't been changed. Obviously the engine and engine oil hasn't been changed. And on top of that, they're apparently having battery trouble. They replaced the wire ends, it appears, but they might have been original. They're weird. Sticks into the side of the terminal clamp, and screws tighten it, and then it hooks onto the post. This ain't cool. So anyway, I'm hoping to modify this thing to put a couple of marine style wing nut clamps on there and actually build some good eyes on the end of the battery cable, because they usually don't make battery cable ends that small for number 4 wire. The engine doesn't need much because it's permanent magnet starter. So we have terminal problems, engine oiling problems, possibly charging system problems because of the starter problem, engine oil not changed, fuel filter not changed, air filter not changed. And you know the valves have never been set in the life of this machine. So, and then down on the base we have clanking weights. Well, there should be oil in there so they don't clank that loud. They sound dry. So that's where we're at there. Now you say, well, we don't have an owner's manual, we don't have this, and you're the guys in the field, you need to be the ones in charge of the maintenance, unless you actually have a dedicated person that is tracking the equipment, that at least knows where it is and roughly how many hours it's being used. Well, why? Well, because the guys that are setting up the job site, the logistics of getting it there, they'll have a rough idea how long that thing's going to be run just in logistics, let alone the fact that it's out in the field and running. So there needs to be times and dates set up that the stuff is serviced. This one needed service badly. It's a good thing it's a Hatz, because I know it's hurt, but it'll probably still run. Hard starting, well, bad engine oil can cause hard starting. If nothing else, cranking trouble, because it takes more to turn it. But the other one is that people don't think of is oil gets up into the piston rings and helps seal that cylinder. Well, you lose compression. It's thinned out, so it's going to go past the rings. But it can get blown by again because it's too thin. The other one is it can go by the valves. It can coke up the valves and cause crap in there. So there's multiple ways it can cause trouble. Fuel dilution in cold weather running, definitely. So those are some of the things that I was looking at with this, that when you're out in the field, think about these in order. You're going to start it up, so you need to know about your battery terminals, and in this case, you can eyeball the things. No, I haven't said a thing about fuel itself, have I? No. So you need to know about your battery, your air filter, your fuel filter, your engine oil and filter, and then every so often you ought to pull the plug on the side of that weight box where they're spinning in there and giving you your forward and reverse, and check out that level too. And you say, well, no, wait a minute. And yeah, some of you realize that I missed another point, but I didn't, because it's irrelevant at this point. Hydraulics that run the forward and reverse. No, on the Wacker Newsoms I used to work on, they had a passive hydraulic system. Seals on a piston, and you move the lever back and forth, and the lever made pressure one way, or when you pulled it, drew it back. It was just a one-way hose down there, so it could push pull, and that's what it was designed was. And in the middle, it would refill any oil that was lost down through the system, which was rare, but it happened now and then. Hey, this thing only won't go forward or reverse anymore. No kidding, stupid. They had an oil level in the box to check. They knew it, but when something went bad, they just complained. So, hydraulics, that's another one to check. So let's go through the list again. And let's do it in reverse because you're going to be putting the fuel in it and checking that. So you're talking fuel, fuel cap, fuel filter, engine air filter, your engine oil and filter. Make sure your level's up to snuff and the quality of the oil isn't terrible. I mean, when you pull it out, it doesn't look like it's flat black. And the other one that's going to go along with that is your battery and the battery condition and the battery terminals. Those things are critical to all of it. The fuel filter, that affects the injection pump, that affects the injector itself, and it also affects going through the injector into the system. Air filter, obviously, dirt going through there into the engine. What was the other one we were talking about? Well, anything that you don't change oil on is a problem. So those filters are critical. Fuel, oil, and air. Critical. Last but not least, when you got gone to your battery and your levels, I'm going to say this one on the gearbox is, and your hydraulics, make sure your levels are good, but the gearbox needs to be changed every so often because those weights are banging in there, and little bitty microscopic chips come off the gears that run this system. So you haven't mentioned anything about the belts. That's another one, but they're usually closed. Okay, so every so often during maintenance procedures, then you got to pull your cover off and check your belt and your belt tension to make sure it's right. And the guys that, if they take it back to the shop for service, probably every 2 or 3 oil changes, you ought to check your valve adjustment, if not every oil change. Because a lot of these have a reusable gasket on the cover. And if not, most of them you can put a nice little black silicone liner on there and put it back on. So there you go. This one I'm going to have to do a lot of testing to make sure, but I have to pull it apart, hoping that the clattering noise I'm hearing is around pieces around the flywheel of flywheel pieces that torn off from the starter. All because somebody let the battery get low, the starter get low, and they consistently start and stop so many times. And rather than having it repaired, they kept it on a job site, kept their mouth shut so they didn't lose the use of it. Might have been the only one they had for all I know. But still, it needed to be brought in and repaired probably 6 months ago. Now they got nothing unless they go out and get a rental, and if they did have another unit to take to them, then it's even dumber. Okay, now for you in management and job site management, if a tamp is that important, always have 2. 2 that are capable of giving you the compaction that you need. Always have 2. The bigger ones are going to hit harder, but the small ones might, with multiple passes, give you what you need. Always have a backup available. Usually they do, so send one of them in for service every so often. Now your little gas motors, now that we're going to go on that one, everything applies except one difference with your gas motor is a pull start. Your recoil needs to be checked and gone over there. But that's not much difference between the two, the same idea. They don't have a fuel oil filter. Nope, some of them don't even have a fuel filter. You need to check your fuel cleanliness. Make sure that oil is changed every 20 hours or so. Yes, changed. And then check your gearbox level. Now some of the smaller ones are dry, so you need to know your equipment while you're there. Belts, of course you check your belts now and then, but that should be done at the service shop unless there's slipping. Every time the engine that's serviced, and they have to be brought in for service, and there should be machines to rotate in and out because these tamps are important. Of that I have no doubt. When I worked at J.P. Riley, I think we ended up with 8 tamps, when there's always 2 back in the shop for service and or repair. And the other one is management have an idea of swapping these things out. Because one of the problems I've seen over the years is they just reach a point where the cases don't match the plate anymore and they won't hold oil even with silicone on there because there's too much movement and it's not a flat engagement anymore. It's not a flat mounting anymore. It tends to get the gearbox to curve so it's on one point. Then it beats the silicone out, and then it starts leaking. The bolt holes are pulled tight, and everything in between vibrates slightly and wears. So there's highs and lows in there. And you might be able to machine it off, but you have to machine the plate, machine the gearbox, and after a while you just have to look at, you have trouble with gears, gear wear, it's time to replace the thing. Now if you want to do all of that other work later, that's a beautiful thing. Go ahead and do it, but trade them out every so often. Put them back together and trade them in. They bring a lot in scrap iron though. But those are my ideas for management, as well as you guys in the field, because you're the ones that are going to get stuck with this problem out there. And if you maintain your piece out in the field properly, call in for service when it needs it. You pull the stick out, it doesn't look good, let them know and get it done. But there's some companies that are out there that actually have an on-site manager with a check sheet. Well, I think it's time for me to go. Yes, it is. And almost deadly on time. Did good tonight. You folks be good and have a good night. And remember, all of this goes by, you may have a machine that's in bad shape and you're almost done with the job and you're going to junk it anyway. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on that. Run it till it blows. But don't be afraid to save some parts for the next one. And that's the other one for your managers to think about, is you found a cheaper one over here, or found a cheaper one there, or you got an MCQ instead of the Wacker Newsom, or you got a Chicago Pneumatic, or Dynapack, or Bomag, or whatever. Do yourself a favor. No more than 2 varieties. And as often as possible, and you have a good dealer, 1. Why? Parts interchangeability. Something goes wrong in the field, something breaks, and you have one in for service. Well, before the service is done, you may be scarfing parts to keep the other one going. And when one finally craps out, put it out in the back room or out in a trailer someplace so you have the spare parts. These things are kind of wear items when you get right down to it, but then again, there's a lot of ways you can keep things going when you're desperate. And the maintenance guys back at the shop, they go to order the parts and somebody's screaming for the machine. Parts are on order. Well, maybe if you have some parts left over, and yes, the obvious thing is there. Each one of them is going to have the exact same parts worn in almost every case. Almost. So take that into consideration too. Sometimes, hey, we've got a spare machine. Take it off of there. Mr. Manager, don't get so excited about that, because if it broke on this machine in the field, the one you have in the junk, that might be why it's in the junk. So have the idea, have somebody check. And if you really can, get a minion to tear them down. Inventory the stuff. That way you're not tearing it apart. Walk over the shelf and pull a part off. And you've already looked the part over. What's available? Is it in good condition? Does it need rebuilding? Shelf where it's immediately available. Shelf here, it needs rework before it goes out. You see, when you got a fleet of tamps, like I was just saying at J.P. Riley, 8 of them, and you have a couple of junkers in there. Now we're talking 8 of one diesel size. And then they had a bunch of gassers in there. It behooves you to think about, tear it down, inspect it, and put it on the shelf. Just saying, sometimes when the numbers are high enough, money and machine numbers, it's probably worth the effort to think about it. Peace and long life. May the Lord bless his children. Good night.